Hi there, and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelos in Ottawa on this Tuesday. Tonight, matters of confidence.
Very pleased that we passed the budget vote.
Mark Carney and the Liberals failed to take seriously consultations with opposition parties.
Prime Minister Mark Carney's minority government survives a budget confidence vote. Did they cede anything to the opposition to make it happen? We'll ask Government House Leader Steve McKinnon in moments. Then, does the budget vote underscore a shift in parliamentary power dynamics? We'll ask our front bench. Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone will all be here coming up. Plus, Royal Sales Tour.
We stand here with open arms with a truly competitive proposition on the table.
We'll sit down for an exclusive one-on-one with Sweden's Deputy Prime Minister Ebba Busch as a Royal Charm campaign rolls through town in the push to win Canada's next fighter jet contract for Sweden's Saab. That's all ahead. First, though.
Everything from the National Food Program through to health care, child care, pharmacare, dental care. All of that is in the budget. I salute the 170 members of the House who supported it.
This is a minority parliament, and the recommendations that Conservatives put forward for an affordable budget, for an affordable life for Canadians, were ignored, and so that's why I voted against it.
At each step of this long process, including the committee, they will have to start all over again because they were not good partners for anybody.
It would be a huge failure of democracy if I didn't listen to my constituents. My job and my responsibility is to my constituents who said, we don't like this budget, but this is not the time for a federal election.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has a minority government 2 seats shy of a majority, but he managed to survive a confidence vote on the budget last night without any public amendments or concessions to the opposition, passing with 170 yeas, 168 nays, and 4 abstentions, 2 from the NDP and 2 from the Conservatives. Steve McKinnon is the government's House Leader. Hi, Minister. Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on your budget passing. I wanted to start off by asking you, were you aware of who would abstain? Did you make any kind of deal, for example, with Matt Genereux or the members from the NDP?
No, we were in the dark. I was reasonably confident, Vashi, that the vote would succeed, that the budget would pass. But I could not lay out a roadmap of how that was going to occur. So I watched it with interest, just as I'm sure you and all your viewers did.
Do you plan on doing anything differently moving forward to alleviate that lack of knowledge about how things are going to go?
Well, look, let me give you perhaps a little secret about the House of Commons. I think once people, as I think back over the events of the last 24 hours, I think people, as they realize that a vote is going one way or another, ensure that the vote is tight or the vote reflects a certain freedom or liberty to protest without perhaps having the consequences such as causing a Christmas election. So I think that's why you saw a tight vote. I can point to other votes where we've attracted the support of this party or that party, and we'll continue to take that on a case-by-case basis.
Sure, I think the reason I'm asking about this vote in particular is because should it have not gone forward, we would be facing a very different situation as Canadians, potentially looking down the barrel of an election. And I think in particular, as I listen to the opposition parties today, the NDP and the Bloc, both of whom described you and your government as immovable around this budget. I wondered, is that in the spirit of a minority parliament? And wouldn't Canadians expect something different?
Well, had we amended the budget, we'd be having a different conversation, you and I. It's a very rare thing to amend a budget, and certainly we think it is a plan that reflects the mandate that we received in the April election. We think it's a plan that is a generational investment in Canada in helping our young people succeed. We spent some time with the opposition certainly explaining some of these priorities behind the scenes, talking about programs or projects in specific places that could be conceivably funded under some of these investments. But we believe the budget is of a piece, and we were very, very happy that it was able to attract the majority of parliamentarians.
But a very slim majority. A majority, to be fair, but a very slim majority, right? By just two votes and the necessity of abstentions. And so I'm not talking about amending the budget, and we've spoken about this before, but the opposition continues to say, even in the lead up to the introduction of the budget, they did not feel that what your government did in the way of conversation and consultation was meaningful. I understand that you have a position to advance, but you have many times said that Canadians did not want an election, that they've just had one. So why wouldn't you do everything in your power in the spirit of minority parliament to make sure that wasn't the case?
Well, I can certify that there were many robust exchanges with members of opposition parties over the course of the last couple of weeks leading up to the vote. I can assure everyone that we've heard out the Conservatives, the New Democrats, the Bloc Quebecois, on the things that are important to them. We were able to point to things in the budget that would in fact satisfy some of those concerns. So I don't agree with the premise at all that we were not open to discussions or to exchanges on the budget, but a government must present a budget and opposition parties must decide whether they're going to support it or not. This is a time-worn tradition in Canada, and we're very, very gratified that after all of those discussions and those exchanges that more parliamentarians voted for the budget than those who voted against it.
I do want to ask about a couple of things in the budget now that it will advance, in particular in relation to something that I know matters to many of your constituents, and that is the cuts to the public service. The union representing the public service is on the Hill today. They're talking to MPs. If I could ask you bluntly, Minister, how many public servants currently employed will lose their jobs?
Well, we don't know the answer to that question. The fact is that there is natural attrition. It's hard to predict, although there are, of course, historical patterns. There will be a voluntary retirement package that people will be able to access, and that may well accelerate retirements and hence avoid layoffs. I've said, I think to you and others in recent times, Vashi, that I believe that the impact on people in voluntary departures will be minimal, and that is certainly a desirable thing. We believe in our public service, we believe in their contributions, and we have a lot of work to do. So we're going to be counting on a robust, rejuvenated public service as we deliver this very exciting set of programs and initiatives to Canadians.
I'm wondering what evidence you have to support the idea that attrition and some sort of retirement incentive alone can get you to the target of an additional 30,000 job cuts, because I have not seen any outside analysis that supports that. And I think there are a lot of families tonight of public servants and those public servants themselves, like I said, many of whom are in your riding, who have no clarity at all from your government about whether they are about to lose their job. Can you offer them that clarity tonight?
Well, one job loss is too many, and we want to avoid those. And I would just, in terms of perhaps resetting your question just a little bit, we've already gone through, and the budget gathers up some reductions and restraint that has occurred already in the past 12 to 18 months. So a number of positions have already been eliminated. These developments have been widely reported, and those are counted in the numbers that you just cited. So again, I just want to reiterate, we've not gone into this with any kind of objective of people losing their jobs. We would find that regrettable if that were widespread. I believe it will be minimal. I believe that we've approached this with a scalpel and not a hacksaw like others would bring to this job. And we're going to make sure that we have a robust public service that can help us deliver on this budget and on our priorities.
Respectfully, Minister, what does minimal mean? Because I actually did, in my calculation, separate the jobs that have been eliminated through attrition, because the budget identifies 40,000, 10,000 have already been gone through attrition. So 30,000 is what you're left with. Attrition alone will not get you there. There is no outside analysis to support that point. When you say you're hopeful there will be minimal job loss, quantify, if you could, what that means. And if you can't, why not?
Well, again, the public service is a complex organization. There are, in some places, defense, for example, opportunities open up as priorities shift to that category of spending, and that will correspondingly generate some employment in the public service. In other places where a program or an initiative has been deemed surplus or subject to restraint, that may engender, of course, some reductions depending on who occupies those jobs, someone close to retirement, someone who wanted to move on to another challenge in any event, which is hard to predict at this point. You will see, I think, very few involuntary job losses throughout the public service, and we have every hope that we can minimize those things.
The budget, though, offers very little in the way of transparency as to which departments will see what level of cuts or what kind of cuts or how many. Again, I take your point that there is work to do to figure that out, but if I'm a public servant, imagine yourself being in their shoes, listening to this tonight, you have no detail to provide them any comfort other than you hope that the cuts will be minimal.
Well, I have no trouble putting myself in their shoes because I live among them. They're my neighbors, they're my friends. I speak to public servants every day. I respect and value the work that they do. And I understand that these cause uncertainty. We have a plan. We have a plan that we think minimizes the impact on public servants, but we also have a sizable deficit, as we've discussed many times. We've also made significant investments in programs and in projects that we think are going to help the economy move and generate more job opportunities. And we'll be very, very focused in Ottawa-Gatineau and right around the country at making sure there continues to be robust employment opportunities in the public sector and, of course, in the private sector.
Why should public servants trust you when you say that? I can think back 10 years to when, or more than 10 years, pardon me, when then Prime Minister Stephen Harper was looking at the prospect and promising the prospect of something that, wouldn't necessarily hurt too much, but had to trim the size of the public service. And I remember Liberals at the time vehemently saying, why should we trust you? How bad is this going to get? Why should Canadians just simply trust your government when that level of detail is nowhere to be found in the budget?
Well, again, I think we need to, just kind of reset the assumptions here. The public service has grown over the past several years. The pandemic has been a main contributor to that. We expanded supports for Canadians. We expanded on a number of initiatives. We are making a change. We are pivoting to a growth agenda, an agenda that grows jobs, grows our economy, grows opportunities for young people. That will necessarily, like in any organization, involve some shifts of people. We will try and, of course, minimize the impact of those on human beings. We want qualified and energetic and motivated people in our public service. We want to continue to attract the best and brightest to the public service, Vashi. But there has been a lot of growth in the public service, and I think some trimming is reasonable, all the while keeping an eye on impact on families and people that I represent, and you can be sure that I am sticking up for them every day.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Minister, thank you so much for your time. As always, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Vashi.
That's Government House Leader Steve McKinnon. We're going to break down the political consequences for all parties of last night's confidence win for the Liberals with our front bench. A little bit later on in the show, Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone will all be here. Up first, though, a Swedish sales pitch. A massive Swedish delegation, including the King and Queen, are here in Ottawa for a state visit. The country's Deputy Prime Minister is with that delegation as Swedish company Saab tries to sell its Gripen fighter jets to this country. That Deputy Prime Minister will join me exclusively after a quick break. Stay right there.
There needs to be more jobs created out of the F-35 contract. That's clear to me and clear to this government. And at the same time, we think that we can use military procurement to get more. And that is why we're looking indeed at the Gripen, and we're having conversations with Saab. So I'm having conversations with Saab, which is offering at this point 10,000 jobs.
That is Industry Minister Melanie Joly as the federal government continues to weigh whether to make its next major fighter jet purchase from American manufacturer Lockheed Martin or the Swedish firm Saab. As Donald Trump's trade war on Canada revved up, the feds announced they would review the purchase of dozens of F-35 fighter jets from U.S.-based Lockheed Martin. Enter Sweden. Swedish company Saab makes the Gripen. And tonight, the Swedes are right here in Ottawa making their pitch. Sweden.
Nice to see you again.
Pardon me, Swedish King Carl Gustaf and Queen Sylvia are here for a state visit and are leading a delegation of around 30 Swedish companies, government agencies, and other organizations. Sweden's Deputy Prime Minister Ebba Busch is also here with the delegation. She joins us tonight exclusively. Hi, Deputy Prime Minister. It's a pleasure to meet you and a pleasure to welcome you to our studio. Thank you for making the time.
Well, thank you, and thank you for a warm welcome to Canada, despite the cold weather. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen so many Swedish flags outside of Sweden, so we're very, very happy about the warm welcome.
Well, I will start on that point, because I think that as Canadians, we're used to seeing companies come and pitch something that they would like Canada to purchase. In this case, it's not just the company, it's quite literally royalty, and then, you know, some of the most important people in the Swedish government, including yourself. Why is this something you felt you wanted to be here for?
Well, we brought in the heavy artillery. We brought in the king and queen of Sweden. It doesn't get any better than that. But I would say that everyone knows these are truly turbulent and quite tough and challenging times. And in those times, you need to choose your friends wisely. And Sweden is choosing Canada. And I think rightly so. And we're also seeing a very strategic work from Canada, and not least from Prime Minister Carney himself, in choosing his friends globally now very, very strategically. And I think Sweden is a great partner to Canada. We actually used to share the same bedrock. Did you know that? Before we were separated by the Atlantic. We were used to be called Rodinia, which is also could be translated into family. And in that sense, I think Canada is quite a bit of family to Sweden. We share a lot of the same values when it comes to, we're both high trust, egalitarian societies, and we believe in that openness, but that openness should not be used against us. And I think now we need to choose our friends very, very wisely. So when we come to America, we come to Canada now.
That's quite a statement. I want to get right to the heart of the matter, which in my view, and I think many Canadians would share, is the possibility of Canada buying fighter jets from a Swedish company in Saab. And I wanted to ask, right off the bat, if it will be possible, let's say Canada decides to go down that route. I mean, we have an order for 88 fighter jets from the United States, but 16 are coming. That means there's another 70 plus that could be, that would fill our capability need. Is that a gap that Saab could fill?
The short answer is yes. Sweden is open for business, and JAS Gripen is probably the best fighter jet in the world, and I think we are prepared to increase that production. And Prime Minister Carney has made it very clear, and me speaking to Minister Joly as well, that would also then entail job opportunities here in Canada, working for Canada in the interest of the Canadians. But of course, it would be a great opportunity for the strategic partnership to go from paper to action between Sweden and Canada.
And I do have questions on the opportunities as you just described it. But I did want to ask, just jumping off the same sort of idea around capacity or capability. What I garner from your answer is that Sweden could fulfill, that number of jets. The timeline is significant as well, because we do have a capability gap here in Canada. Can the Gripen do what the F-35s would have done in the same amount of time?
Well, I would say that Gripen comes with a slightly different set of capacities. It's a highly intricate and highly sophisticated system-in-system operations. That if you have ever flown a fighter jet like this, I have not. Obviously, it is not my line of work.
Me either. Yeah.
But I mean, the men and women that are set to actually defend our countries, defend our values, the ones that we have seen operating the airspace above Poland now, for example, where Sweden is participating in an air policing mission there, and FLF in the Baltic area, where Canada is leading. I mean, it's something that is very difficult to get in another fighter jet, which makes the Gripen very special. But I mean, this would be a commitment between Sweden and Canada to also increase the tempo of permitting and the process to actually get these produced and up and running into space. But we're prepared to do that work, and Saab is well represented this week as well.
Might it take a little bit longer? Do I garner from what you're saying, though, just because of the fact that it has a different set of requirements?
No, I mean, Saab would be the ones that would have to answer for details of that sort. But the way that we have looked into this together with our Canadian counterparts, we think that we can match what is needed for the Canadian interests.
And when you talk about, and certainly the company has spoken about this very recently to my colleague who was over in Sweden, the possibility of creating Canadian jobs, that the federal government has almost made it a stipulation of whatever agreement goes forward. Can you expand on what you envision for that? Like for Canadians in particular who are watching tonight, wondering what this means for them, how would you answer that?
No, to put it very, very bluntly, it would mean Canadian jobs in Canada. It would be a Swedish fighter jet, world class, but it would be a true partnership, and that is what we're saying now. We're friends, we're allies, we're true partners. That is what we're working for with this strategic partnership that was signed between my Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson and Prime Minister Mark Carney today as well. So it would entail concrete job opportunities here.
And I know in the one instance when it comes to the fighter jet, for example, the pitch is for a certain number of jobs, but we're reading reports now that there could be an additional pitch for a different type of aircraft, a surveillance one in the global eye. I'm wondering from where you sit, kind of bigger picture, is the idea of this relationship, job creation in a country, like making things, Swedish companies making things in Canada, is that a harbinger of things to come? Like, do you envision, best case scenario, more of that?
Yes, and that is what we're hoping to get out of this also. This is the reason why we come with a large and highly qualified business delegation this week as well. Sweden is truly open for business, and coming back to the matter of increased competitiveness, truly serving our citizens, the Swedish people and the Canadian people. I think Europe, for far too long, we've played in sort of, to speak Canadian, to speak hockey terms, we've played in box play. And it's time to get out of that and, come into power play instead. And then we need to choose our friends very, very wisely. And we're a small country, but we're a very smart country. We're the second in the world when it comes to innovation. The reason that we can make fighter jets, submarines, AVAC systems, that we also send satellites into space, although we're a 10 million people country, the reason we can deliver all of this because we choose our friends very, very specifically. And we'd like to partner up even closer with Canada to make sure that we have value chains in a double sense. Value, economic value for our citizens, but also value with countries with whom we share the same values.
Do you think this moment for Sweden and Canada would have come without Donald Trump?
Well, in part, maybe no. I mean, I was here, I'm coming back to Canada. I was here as minister in my current position just 2 years ago with Minister Champagne, looking into a lot of possible opportunities then. A lot of that has gone from words to action and is also the reason why we are here. But of course, I mean, we still see the US as our friends in Sweden, but they have come so much more unpredictable. And we are looking for partners that are not only transactional, like how can I profit for you, but rather how can we both profit from this. And this is also the message that Prime Minister Carney is sending throughout the world with all of the partnerships that he and the works that he's doing internationally. Is it needs to benefit the both of us, and that's why I think Canada and Sweden also are a good match.
Have they indicated to you how soon they will make a decision?
No, and I think, I mean, this is decisions that have to be made in a very orderly manner. But I mean, Sweden is in Daft Punk mode, so we're ready to go, you know, faster, stronger, harder, better, and that's what we're looking for now.
One final question, kind of bridging your last two answers. So the pressure on us is not just a money thing, right? It's that we have, you know, great interoperability with the potential purchase of F-35s with the United States, and particularly from a continental defense perspective, from a NORAD perspective, that is significant. I had the U.S. ambassador essentially say, like, NORAD could be up for discussion if Canada pulls out of this deal. And I say that only because I know you will be well aware of the sort of pressure we face in making this decision. And I'm wondering how, if you were in our shoes, you might navigate that.
Well, I believe that the ones that cave under a pressure from a so-called friend that would actually cause true harm, then that part will also then show quite great weakness, and that weakness will be taken advantage of. And I say this as a country who have been a very close ally to the NATO, but that we're not full-on members. We stay forever grateful for the firm support that we got from Canada entering and to become a full worthy member of NATO. But these are challenging times for real. A lot is at stake. And we have not war within the EU, but we have war on European soil. And we know that Putin will not stop at the border of Ukraine if he wins. So for us, I mean, Canada needs to make their own decision, and Sweden will respect that. But that also says something. We do not threaten our way into a deal. We stand here with open arms, with a truly competitive proposition on the table.
I will leave it on that note. A pleasure, Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, that is the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden. I want to take you live to the floor of the Senate in the United States because we have some breaking news as reported by a number of U.S. Media outlets. It looks like Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, a Democrat, has put forward a bill and asked for unanimous consent. That bill allows for what passed in the House earlier today to force the Department of Justice to release all the files related to Jeffrey Epstein. By unanimous consent in the Senate, now heads to the desk of U.S. President Donald Trump. Donald Trump has to sign off on the release of those files through the Justice Department in order for them to be made public. This has been the focus of a ton of political scrutiny over the last number of weeks, with the president himself switching his position on what Republicans in the House this afternoon should do, from saying they should vote against it to then over the weekend deciding they should vote for it. He got a number of questions on it from reporters today, and he did not answer them, snapping back at him. It's a politically sensitive issue for the president. Much of his base really supports the release of these files. It appears that now the Senate has given that the green light, that they have done what the House did this afternoon, added their voices to as senators ordering the Department of Justice to release all the files related to Jeffrey Epstein. And that decision will now rest as early as this evening with U.S. President Donald Trump. We're going to continue tracking developments out of the Senate and see if there's any reaction, of course, from the president. We'll convey it to you as soon as it comes into our newsroom. I'll take a quick break here on Power Play. We've got lots more after that break.
Epstein did not act alone.
Canadians are cash-strapped and needed a break. Instead, the Prime Minister gave them the costliest budget in Canadian history. $78 billion of additional debt works out to about $5,000 for every single cash-strapped family in this country.
They voted against investment in infrastructure. Under this leader, they voted against investment in housing. Under this Conservative leader, they voted against productivity and innovation in our country.
He says they're spending billions of dollars more on housing. The results are out today. Housing starts down 17% year over year.
Conservatives have a tough time with numbers sometimes. We understand that. 2025 versus 2024, we are up 5% with housing starts.
Reaction there to the federal budget, which narrowly survived last night's confidence vote. There will be no snap election as a result for now, but the dynamics in the House of Commons are something to watch since the budget only passed because 4 MPs abstained. And of course, Liz May, the Green Party leader, voted with the government. Let's talk about that with our front bench here this evening. Former senior advisor to the Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne, Dan Moulton. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Larissa Waller is the founder of Henley Strategies. She's a former head of communications for Ontario's Conservative Premier Doug Ford. Kathleen Monk here in studio is former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk & Associates. And Laura Stone rounds us out. She's a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Hey. Happy day after election, or day after vote. I mean, no election, whatever you want to call it. Kathleen, I actually thought it was not futile in that I really emerged from that vote last night with a clearer picture of, in particular, where the opposition parties are. And they do not want an election. I think that's not just true of one opposition party. It's true of all of them.
It is true. And I would say on New Democrats' behalf, they actually came out and said that. We know that we do not want an election. We don't want to throw Canadians into elections, so we voted the way we did. On the other hand, you have the Conservatives, right, who have vowed at every opportunity to take down the government, have said they will oppose at every opportunity, said they will fight the government tooth and nail to take them down because they oppose the Carney government so much. And yet, when it comes down to brass tacks, what do? They hide behind the curtains. They literally hid behind the curtains last night.
Explain what you mean, just for people who were not glued like
I mean, there's so much comedic material in what's happening in the House of Commons right now that, you know, this hour for 22 minutes could have a whole season just based on the last few days. But no one would understand it because it's so procedural. But I'll tell you what happened was the Conservatives were unsure, really, of how the vote was going to play out. But they didn't want to trigger election either, but they weren't willing to say that. So the House leader, Andrew Scheer, and the caucus chair, Scott Reid, hid behind the curtains and decided to try to vote basically on the online app, which is allowed. You're allowed to do that. But basically, it allows also you to vote at the last minute to see how the other cards are, how everything's playing out, and then they still in the end had to scramble into the House because there were some glitches apparently with the technology. But the point is, this party, the Conservative Party, has said they would fight at every moment, and yet when it comes down, they fold like a cheap shirt. I mean, I agree. Listen, New Democrats are getting heat too. They're saying, hey, you know, why didn't you stand up, all 7 of you? All 7 of you, why didn't you stand up and all vote en masse? 5 did vote against the government and 2 abstained because they didn't want to trigger the election. I mean, the same cannot be said for the Conservative caucus, where their leadership basically held out to the last minute. They had 2 abstentions. You've noted Genereux and Stubbs, and one for a medical issue. I wish Mrs. Stubbs, you know, the best, but I mean, come on, it's a joke.
Well, like what it does, Laura, is underscore what I said, right? Which is, it's obvious that both the NDP and the Conservatives, like the focus in the lead up to the budget had been on the NDP primarily, right? But like both don't want an election, I think.
Yes, I think I'm the only freak in the nation who did want one because I'm a political junkie and I love this stuff. But no, I'm just kidding. But no, look, I mean, let's just say what number one, it actually was suspenseful last night. I mean, I think 90%, we were 90% sure there wasn't going to be an election, but no one knew for sure, right? Because the parties hadn't formally declared in the way that they normally do in the lead up to these votes how things were going to shake out. There was an air of mystery. There was a twist with Elizabeth May saying midday she was going to support the budget, but no one knew for sure. And so I think there was certainly uncertainty heading into that. But you're absolutely right. I think both the Conservatives and the NDP knew that this is not the right time for an election for their parties. The NDP are in the midst of a leadership race. The Conservatives are still kind of finding their footing with the return of Pierre Poilievre to the House of Commons. They have some work to do there. He's facing a leadership review in January as well. Look, I mean, the Liberals had been kind of cataloging this, I think, for a few weeks of trying to blame the opposition for wanting one. I think the Liberals and certainly the Bloc may have been the only party that would have accepted it. But I think the electorate, the public, certainly didn't want this. They weren't interested in heading back to the polls this year. And I think everyone's just kind of ready to move on now with the business of governing after last night's drama and suspense.
What position do you think this leaves the Liberals in, Larissa? Because I'm not saying this will apply to every confidence vote, but ultimately, to be fair to them, they presented a budget, they made no concessions to the opposition, and the opposition essentially allowed for that budget to pass.
Yeah, they were banking on the fact that nobody wants an election. We talked about this on the radio earlier, Vashi. This wasn't a vote in the confidence of the budget. This was a vote on, do you want an election? The Liberals don't want one either, neither does the Bloc. But who could actually go and fight an election is a different question. The Conservatives can. They have the money. They have the organization. So do the Liberals. The Bloc could figure it out. The NDP cannot. And so, I give you some grace here that Andrew Scheer and Scott Reid were probably playing it safe. But at the end of the day, I think that they were right in their calculation that it was the NDP that really couldn't afford an election. It's going to be interesting to see how these future confidence votes go because the margins are so thin. I mean, there's about 4 people, right? So when there's a bigger opposition or a smaller opposition and you have a few more seats to play with, you kind of know how it's going to go. But I heard another pundit say this a few weeks ago, that human error will play so much into whether or not votes pass. Like, did somebody show up when they were supposed to show up? Did the app log on? And when we have 1 or 2 seats that we're playing with here, human error can really screw things up for every party here.
You could even see that, though, in as Kathleen described it, Dan, the fact that Mr. Scheer and Mr. Reid waited, right? Like, they were not fully confident because of the change in Elizabeth May's vote that the NDP would do what had been communicated, I think, earlier in the day they would do, right? So, everyone was hedging, which certainly leaves you with the impression that kind of drama is not, it could unfold again.
For sure. And look, let's stay in the weeds of this drama for a minute. I think it was a miscalculation on the part of the Conservatives to not show some resolve and strength in this position that they wanted to vote against the budget and trigger an election. They either want one or they don't want one. And in a moment like that, when all the eyes are fixed on you because there is this dramatic event in which something could go wrong, an election could get triggered, you kind of have to be resolved. You have to be strong in that position. And I think they really failed that test last night. The reality, though, is, just to zoom out here a little bit, I think most Canadians would have seen last night and today, as they would have seen the news, the budget passed, right? The budget has passed this first test. It's moving forward. The Liberals have brought forward a plan to fund the agenda that they put forward before Canadians last spring, one that Canadians overwhelmingly endorsed, and believe is the right plan for this moment, a moment of great economic anxiety where we need to do and build big things as a country. And so that plan was brought forward. The Liberals look in this moment like they're the only ones with a credible plan to govern. And now it has the support of parliamentarians at this important juncture. And it looks like it will continue to have that support. And so I think, we can get into the weeds of the drama of that moment and whether or not Andrew Scheer and Scott Reid were standing behind curtains or not. But I think the reality is most Canadians who aren't following this day to day are seeing the Liberals as the only ones with a credible plan to get the job done in this moment.
All right, we're going to put that thesis to the test after a short break. The front bench is back. We're going to talk pipeline politics after that break. Back in a moment.
Well, I think we have to be realistic that there are certain members of his caucus and cabinet who are going to have to come to terms with doing a 180 on some of the bad laws that they supported and voted for over the past 10 years. And that is possible. Politicians have been known when they realize that they've made an error, that they have to go in a different direction. And I think that that's what the last election was about. It may well be that there are some members of his caucus who are not fully on board with that new vision, but I will know in a matter of days whether or not they're influential enough to change the direction that I think that the Prime Minister and I want to go.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith there on the latest state of talks with the federal government as both sides work towards a so-called memorandum of understanding over a potential pipeline project and changes to environmental laws. Smith had previously set a deadline by this past Sunday's Grey Cup, and now she says she's hoping for one by the end of the month. Let's bring back our front bench, Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone to talk about the prospect of that. Dan, I'll pick up with you sort of where we left off on the last break. I think, certainly the Liberals are positioning themselves to be able to convey the message that you did, which is basically, this is our plan. This is the kind of economy that we are focused on. And rhetorically, the Prime Minister has talked a lot about conventional energy. But in order to develop it, that does require compromise on the environmental side. Will he be able politically to square that circle?
I think in the short term, yes. I mean, we've seen him walking that tightrope, as you outlined it, for the last 8 months, and I think doing it pretty deftly, right? In this moment, there's a great anxiety among Canadians about our economic situation, and I think there's a national consensus around, as I said earlier, doing big things and getting big things built, right? There's a real energy in that direction right now, and I think the Prime Minister has channeled that into one of his signature achievements in the major projects office and moving forward on a number of nation-building scale projects that will help to develop a range of sectors, including energy and including critical minerals, and improving our export capacity coast to coast. And so, the Premier of Alberta has been largely aligned with that mission over the last few weeks. I think she, brings a certain skepticism to it. I'm not sure those comments are terribly helpful at this juncture, a bit like rubbing salt in the wound. But at the same time, the Prime Minister's eagerness to move forward on a number of these projects. We've seen the latest list of major projects announced that I think took another step forward in building consensus. I think he's showing a political capacity to get this job done. That's in the short term. I do think there will be longer term challenges for the Liberal Party. We're in a moment right now where voters, including those that vote for the Liberal Party, are really focused on the economy and on developing these projects, developing our energy sector in a way that when the country's a little bit more focused on other priorities like climate change or climate policy, we tend to get a little distracted off of. That is cyclical, and we may come back to a place, in a few years' time where, that is where voters are. And I think walking this tightrope gets a little trickier, but for the short term, I think it's working for the government, and I think they're going to continue pushing this forward because it's in the best interest of the country and our economy.
If, Larissa, that national consensus does exist, do you think it extends to the cabinet table?
Probably the cabinet table. Well, Steve Guilbeault's still at the cabinet table, so no, I don't. But I think the major players around
Gregor Robertson, too, to be blunt, has been
honestly,
very unequivocal about his opposition.
100%. And so I don't envy the role that the Prime Minister and the game the Prime Minister has to play of managing his caucus and his cabinet that includes both Minister Hodgson and Steve Guilbeault, right? And his BC caucus that, frankly, I think will do everything they can to stop this. And I don't blame Danielle Smith for calling them out and saying the quiet part out loud. I think it's to the Prime Minister's credit that he has abandoned his environmental activist roots and has leaned in hard into Canada's ethical, clean oil supply and has spoken pretty favorably about it. And there are some policy tools in this budget that I think really help and speak to the direction that the Prime Minister wants to take our energy sector. The issue, to Dan's point, is his caucus and is the left fraction of his caucus going to stomach it? And you saw after the budget, for example, Nader Erskine-Smith put out a video, criticizing a lot of elements of the budget, including its lack of, perceived environmental protection. So I'm pretty interested to see how this plays out.
But ultimately, Nathaniel Erskine-Smith voted for the budget, Kathleen, and I don't get the sense that the Prime Minister is overly, in the short term, overly concerned with blowback from his caucus. Again, to Dan's point, that could change. But he doesn't give that impression. That's not the vibe I have. Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, it was 6-7 months ago that he actually, gave them life again, right? And gave the Liberal Party the chance to form government. So I think he can keep his caucus in line, although I think Premier Danielle Smith is right to poke, not only cabinet, but caucus, as Larissa says, and see if she can, sow those seeds of discontent more. Like, will they have to wait till maybe more Liberals raise their hand and decide they're exiting politics before such an MOU? Maybe it's not going to be the end of November. Maybe it's going to be 2026, beginning of 26, before they can come to some understanding. But I just want to make one quick point. Danielle Smith's not making herself an easy dance partner, because while she's working on these energy issues in the MOU, she's also invoking the notwithstanding clause against teachers 2 weeks ago and today against a trio of bills that address transgender youth. So she could learn some charm. Maybe not work on all of those things at once that are so offensive to so many people. Both you invoking the notwithstanding clause, trampling on labor rights, trampling on charter rights of individuals, and then still trying to kind of make peace with Ottawa in terms of the MOU.
Yeah, this is the second piece of legislation on a host of issues related to trans in sports and trans Canadians in sports. It's the second time within a month that she's introduced a type of legislation with the notwithstanding clause. What I will say, though, as Kathleen was describing that, I thought to myself, Laura, again, how different Carney, the Prime Minister Carney is from the previous government, because I cannot envision a time that the previous government would not have conflated the two issues or spoken out forcefully against what the Premier was doing. And in this case, they're not.
Silence.
They're treating them separately.
Yeah, and I mean, Danielle Smith has been remarkably deferential to the Prime Minister, right? She has not come out and spoken very critically of him. In fact, she's been almost his biggest champion at times, which is the bizarro world that we're living in. It'll be fascinating to see how far the Prime Minister goes. I think he has said publicly that he's not willing to repeal all of these so-called bad laws that Danielle Smith wants repealed. And I think he's trying to strike a happy balance between supporting these pipeline projects, but he'll obviously have to bring in the environmentalists or the climate change activists, not just from within his caucus, but among the broader public too. He will have to do something to pay tribute to them as well. So I don't think it's just within his caucus that he has to worry about. He has to worry about the broad public that I think does still care and believe in climate change and wants something done on that front, as well as David Eby in BC, the Premier, who has spoken out repeatedly against a pipeline. He is going to have to do something to bring him in. So he's got a very delicate balancing act to do. But I think he understands that, and we'll have to see sort of when the rubber hits the road, what he's putting on the table that will make everyone in this country happy.
Just another day at the office. I'll leave it there. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Wonderful discussion. Our front bench, Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. We're back in a moment with our takeaway. Welcome back to Power Play. Our takeaway today comes from our exclusive interview with Sweden's Deputy Prime Minister. The Deputy Prime Minister, Ebba Busch, is here in Ottawa, part of a huge Swedish delegation, making a pitch for a Swedish fighter jet, the Gripen, from Saab. I asked her if we were to back away, Canada, from a deal to purchase F-35s. There's a review going on right now. What that would say to the U.S. The ambassador from that country has said, for example, something along the lines of NORAD could be up for discussion again if we did back away from the F-35 purchase. If she were to put herself in our shoes, how would she navigate it?
Canada needs to make their own decision, and Sweden will respect that. But that also says something. We do not threaten our way into a deal. We stand here with open arms, with a truly competitive proposition on the table.
A couple of quick salient things the Deputy Prime Minister told us. She thought that that Saab could fulfill the capability requirement that F-35s were intended to. And she did not have an answer from the federal government about when they might complete their decision on this or the review of their F-35s. We stand by waiting for that decision. I'll leave Power Play there. I'm Vashti Capellos. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.